The United States has indicated that it will withdraw from peace talks between Russia and Ukraine if there is no sign of progress in the coming days. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the United States will not stay engaged if diplomacy keeps stalling. On the ground, however, the war continues to worsen. Russia has launched a deadly strike on Kyiv early on Friday. One person was killed and over 80 others were injured, including about 6 children. Now, the attack damaged homes, a school and also a factory, and Ukrainian officials say that ballistic missiles, including cluster warheads, were used.
We were asleep. I saw some kind of flash. I don't know. Everything flew around. There was smoke. My wife took our daughter from the room there and gave her to me. We covered her in a blanket. We first thought the blood on her was mine, but then we found out that she had a shrapnel injury near her eye.
The United States has taken a pretty sharp turn in the diplomatic talks after high-level meetings in Paris. The U.S. President Donald Trump, who initially promised a quick ceasefire, has extended his timeline. But Washington, it appears, is running out of patience. Russia has rejected a 30-day ceasefire proposal supported by the United States and Ukraine, while a limited truce around energy infrastructure has already broken down. Now, Rubio has warned the White House is increasingly getting frustrated as the talks continue to drag on, resulting in almost nothing. Now, Trump has been very critical of all sides and has shifted the blame for the war onto his predecessor. Inside the Trump administration, there is a growing divide, with some pushing for a harder stance on Moscow, while others are still backing for a strategic reopening with Russia.
I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done. You know, we'll do what we can on the margins. We'll be ready to help whenever you're ready to have peace. But we're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has backed an unconditional ceasefire but insists that any deal must include security guarantees. Russia wants military aid cut off, a ban on NATO membership for Ukraine, and also the control of the 4 occupied regions, that is Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Kyiv has called Moscow's demands as simply unacceptable. The Kremlin has also asserted that some progress has already been made in talks that could bring about a possible peace settlement to end the war, but it has admitted that contacts were rather pretty complicated with the United States at the moment.
Contacts going on are quite complicated because, naturally, the topic of peace settlement in Ukraine is not an easy one. Russia is committed to resolving this conflict, ensuring its own interests, and is open to dialogue. We continue to do this.
All right, so this, of course, is what Marco Rubio has said, that he says that the United States is looking at these talks. It's going to be a matter of days. And if the involved parties, the concerned parties, are interested in peace, then the United States will, of course, progress further. Otherwise, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the United States, says that the United States will be out of these negotiations. Now, remember, these were comments that he made after the high-level discussions with European and Ukrainian leaders, where Rubio said that the Trump administration was assessing whether the effort even remains viable. So he said that if things have to happen, they have to happen in the next few weeks. Otherwise, it's going to be a matter of days, and the United States will be out of these negotiations if the concerned parties are not serious enough in making progress towards a peace deal. Remember, this is in stark contrast to what the Trump administration had been saying all along ever since Donald Trump took charge at the White House, where Donald Trump was pretty optimistic that he was close to a deal, but things as they stand, once the negotiations have also brought in other stakeholders, such as the European leaders, the Ukrainians, etc., the Americans seem not so sure about the negotiations. But this is a war that the Americans have quite clearly backed. They've done so for the last 3 years. But Donald Trump has blamed his predecessor, Joe Biden, for backing the Ukrainian war effort, and he effectively wants to cut a deal But a lot of people have said that the Americans, when they've been talking to the Russian counterparts, have effectively almost conceded to the demands that have been put forth by the Russians. And also in that dramatic meeting that Volodymyr Zelensky had with Vladimir Putin in the White House, it was pretty evident where the American president and the vice president told the Ukrainian president that he literally had no cards to play and that he was gambling with the Third World War. So that is the level of American involvement in this war, where President Trump, it appears, is not very keen on pursuing with these negotiations if the concerned parties, in this case that is Ukraine and also other Europeans who say that they have a clear stake in the security of Europe with the militarization of Russia happening at an unprecedented scale in the last few years, where the Europeans now feel that probably the United States is beginning to pull back its security guarantees in any war with Russia. Very difficult negotiations is what has panned out so far, and Marco Rubio, not mincing words, saying that the Americans will be out of the negotiations in a matter of days if the concerned stakeholders do not show progress. All right, now to give us more perspective in this, we're joined on this broadcast by our correspondent Ross Cullen, who's joining us live from Paris. Ross, these are some interesting comments that have been made by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where he says that it's a matter of days where if the stakeholders do not show progress, then the United States will be out of these negotiations. Give us a sense of how the European leaders are reacting to this.
Well, on Thursday, we had what was viewed by the European leaders as very successful talks. An excellent exchange was how the French presidency viewed the first time that we had multilateral talks around the same table. The United Kingdom, the United States, Ukraine, France and Germany for the first time having peace negotiations in that format. They have held multilateral and bilateral meetings with different partners before, but this was the first time those five key allies had a discussion at the same time. We had meetings between the diplomatic advisors, meeting between the foreign ministers of all the different countries. The President Emmanuel Macron was there, along with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Steve Witkoff, the Special Envoy for US President Donald Trump. However, on his departure from Paris this morning, Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, flying out of the airport in Paris that's usually used for business and executive travel, Le Bourget, he made these comments saying that if there is real progress, the US will be in. If there isn't real progress, we will be out. We've got other things to do. Donald Trump has other priorities in the world. It's not always about Ukraine. So this is something that would be very worrying to France, Germany, the United Kingdom and Ukraine, although there is the possibility that the Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, could be signing that much anticipated minerals deal in Washington next week. And if Washington feels there has been real progress in the next week, until we get to next Thursday when the minerals deal could be signed, then there could be the chance for further negotiations with the United States down the line. But certainly that comment from Marco Rubio that the United States will be out of brokering any ceasefire deal if there's no real progress is something that would be concerning European leaders.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Ross Cullen, for joining us with all those details there.